Hello, Hoovians, and welcome back to the third channel. Hooray! I'm back doing more interviews. Yes, I am. That means it's more nonsense from me. Now, if you've been watching this channel, you've seen all the nonsense. There's more coming. That's all I've got. So that's the admin we've got to give. But my guess is we're very exciting today. If you look at the history of this channel, there might be hints of this. As I'm not hinting the interview was going to happen, just hints that I'm a fan of this person in general anyway, due to the material he's been in. So my guess is best known as Father Stone from Father Ted. It's one and only Michael Redmond.
Hello, Tom. How you doing?
Am I right?
Good.
So we'll start at the very beginning, as Julie Andrews used to say before she can no longer sing. How did you get into the wonderful world of acting?
Well, it's a strange thing. I know we had planned to get into acting at all. I mean, my sort of base was stand-up, really. I started doing stand-up in 1986, I think, in London. And I had no real ambitions to be an actor, because I'm probably not really an actor as such. I mean, I can act within a limited range, kind of for it's an extension of myself, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to be offered a part in a Shakespearean play, if you know what I mean. So that was I mean, if you sort of ask me how I got into Father Ted, I can tell you how it happened. I was doing a stand-up gig in London at the Bloomsbury Theatre. It was kind of an Irish night. I think Dylan Moran and Ardal O'Hanlon, who played Dougal in Father Ted, were also on the bill. And after the show, I was studying the foyer with Ardal, I think, and these two guys came up to us, and it was Graham Linehan and Arthur Matthews, the writer of Father Ted, and they said they were writing a sitcom about three priests on a remote island and off the west coast of Ireland, and there might be a part for both of us. And I didn't really think much of it at the time, you know. I just thought three priests on an island off the west of Ireland mightn't be particularly interesting. It could be just sort of hackneyed old crap, but as it turned out, it wasn't at all. But I didn't really think much of it at the time. But then about 6 months later, I was asked to come in and read for the part of Father Stone. It was Jeffrey Perkins, who's now passed. He was the producer, and Graham and Arthur were there as well. It wasn't so much an audition; it was kind of they just sort of asked me to say a few lines from the script. But I remember when I went in first, because my sort of the well-known line from Father Ted is when I say I'm fine. But when I went in, so I think Graham said, "How are you doing?" And I said, "I'm fine," and they all laughed, and I didn't know what they were laughing at at the time. But yeah, that was how I basically got the part of Father Ted. That they saw my stand-up and they thought that my stand-up would be kind of suitable for the part of Father Stone, because when I did stand-up then, it was very much a very droll sort of delivery. I used to just deliver a one-liner and then pause, and it kind of wasn't too far removed from Father Stone, really, I suppose. But I think they wrote a lot of parts, I think, for not so much for actors, but for some of their favorite comedians, and they kind of wrote the part around whatever the comedian's sort of stand-up act was. So that's basically how Father Stone came about, really. I mean, not that I mean, I would like to think my stand-up is a bit more sort of less monosyllabic than Father Stone, but I could see how they saw that I would suit the part, you know.
Yeah. And when you're out and about, when it was airing, were you getting more recognised when you were in the UK, or were you getting recognised when you were in Ireland?
Well, I haven't really lived in Ireland for since 1985. I went back for a short while, but it's been mostly been in the UK. I've lived, and it wasn't immediate, because you know I was only in one episode. People think I was in a few more episodes, but I think the episode I was in has been repeated quite a lot, and a lot of people think that I was in a few episodes rather than just one. But it took a while. I mean, I think it was about. I think if you're in a sitcom and you're just in one episode, it takes a while for people to start recognizing you, unless it's repeated quite a lot, which it was. So I think it was about 2 years later I started getting recognized. It wasn't kind of like I would get mobbed in the street or mobbed in a restaurant, but I could see people, you know, say, "Oh, are you Father Stone?" That kind of thing. It's quite nice, really. I didn't mind it. It wasn't. A lot of people think that you know you might get a bit fed up, people coming up to you, but I thought it was fun because it wasn't. It wasn't like Superstar where I couldn't move. You know, just
Yeah.
occasionally people might ask me for a selfie and that kind of thing. But I remember when I realized that I was beginning to get recognized. I was living in London at the time, and my partner at the time, she was manager of a restaurant in Crouch End called Banners. I don't know whether you know that part of London, but part of the her manager's job was that we got the flat above the restaurant, and there was a hatch leading up from the restaurant into the flat. And I remember my girlfriend rang me one evening because I was home with the kids, and it was at the time we were still allowed to smoke indoors, and she said she'd forgotten her cigarettes, so could I come to the hatch and drop her cigarettes down? But in between her phone call, she was distracted by some customer looking for an order or something, and so I went down and I opened the hatch, which was quite noisy. But there was a table underneath the hatch with a couple sitting at it, and they heard the hatch opening, and they looked up, and all they saw was my sort of disembodied head looking down. And the guy just stared at me for a few seconds, then he just went, "Jesus, it's Father Stone." So that's where I realized that it was beginning to get quite big. Yeah.
And
But I said I quite like him, and it's heightened my profile. I've no, I don't mind people recognize me. It's fine.
and do you reckon that being in an episode of what then became a huge sitcom, do you reckon
Yeah.
that helped you when you were going on tour and going on stage because you had more people coming to see you because they'd seen you on an episode of Father Ted?
Undoubtedly, yeah. I mean, it's not as much. I mean, if I was in every episode, it would have been a lot more. But I mean, there was certainly a core following because of the Father Ted thing. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Yeah, it's certainly helped my profile.
And are you one of those type of people that when you're on something, either on TV or radio, do you sit down and watch or listen to your thing on, or are you the type of that runs from the hills until it's finished?
I literally run to the hills until it's finished. Yeah, because no reflection on the show, but it's just I hate the sound of my own voice, basically.
And one of the other things you've appeared in on the radio is labelled as one of the greatest radio sitcoms. I mean, you could argue with that, but there's so many to choose from. It would be in the top 10. What was it like working on Fags, Bags, and Mags?
Yeah, that was fantastic because it was the writers Sanjeev Kohli and Donny McCleary. They're both Glasgow. I'm Glasgow based, by the way, in case you didn't know that. And they'd come along. I used to compare a show at the Stand Comedy Club called Michael Redmond Sunday Service, and they came along a couple of times, and they'd written this part for a character called Bishop Briggs, who was once again less monosyllabic than Father Stone, but a bit sort of off the wall. And I think they were already in. It was already about they were into the third series at this stage. So I think I came in at the fourth or fifth series. I can't remember exactly which, but I've been a sort of a stock character in the series since then, and it's absolutely fantastic. Yeah, because it's usually recorded about once every year. And I think they're in their it's a record-breaking 11th series now. I think,
Yeah,
and I'm just amazed that it hasn't because I remember when I started off working in London in the late 80s, if you had a show on Radio 4, which was a success on BBC Radio 4, it was a success. It was automatically almost transferred to television. But that doesn't seem to be the case anymore, unfortunately. But I think it would make a great television series.
yeah. Well, there's a few things that have tried to make it to TV, but I think it's because like radio's a lot more cheaper than
Oh,
TV.
there's no doubt. Yeah. They're a lot more careful these days because of the financial structure.
And why do you reckon that Fags, Bags, and Mags have become so popular and lasted so long?
I think it's just well, number one, the writing is brilliant. I think the part they wrote for me, in particular, I mean, the writing over the whole thing is great. But I mean, I really just love the part they wrote for me because it just comes naturally to me what they've written. But I think they're just the writing and also the acting from all the other characters, all the other cast. I think is just brilliant. And it's just a lovely feeling in the place when you go to record it. There's everybody's very supportive because I remember the first time I went to a reading in the comedy unit in Glasgow, and I didn't really know any of the other guys really. Apart from I knew Gavin Mitchell, who plays. I don't know whether you've ever seen the sitcom Still Game. He plays the part of Bobby the barman, and he was there as well. But I didn't really know any of the others, and I was really nervous because I didn't really consider myself an actor. So I thought all these sort of actors are going to be doing all these brilliant sort of monologues, and I'm just going to look like an idiot, just being me. But once I started reading it, everybody started laughing. So I just sort of relaxed immediately, and it was just great. Everybody's just really supportive, and everybody. I think the main reason, I think, part of the reason is that, well, a large reason is it's such a huge success is that all the actors really love the show. You know what I mean? And that comes across, I think.
And do you reckon that helps make something a success if you can hear that the actors are enjoying themselves as well as the listeners?
Absolutely, yeah. There's no doubt about it because it gives the actors confidence that what they're doing is funny, and it's just a lovely bit of nonsense. I mean that in the best possible way. That's what it is. It's just sublime but nonsensical at the same time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that works really well in comedy if it is nonsense. And one of
Yeah,
the things you've worked on that some people would class as nonsense because the style of the person that hosts the program is bizarre.
yeah, exactly.
What was it like appearing on an episode of Harry Hill's Tea Time?
Yeah. Well, Harry Hill's great, yeah. I mean, he's one of my favorite comedians, yeah, because that's the sort of comedy I like. Just sort of, as I say, it is nonsense. I suppose my initial inspiration for comedy was the Goon Show with Spike Milligan, and then I suppose Monty Python and Peter Cook. That's the sort of comedy I really like. Nonsense but genius at the same time.
Yeah, and do you reckon that it's nonsense helps make comedy more different than just people stood there telling them that they went to a pub once? Do you reckon that it's
Yeah,
more?
true. Yeah, so that's the sort of stuff I like. Yeah, it's also it helps it stand out, I think, as well if it's a little bit different. I think
And
that's probably part of the reasons Father Ted was a huge success because I think it was the first ever, not just the first ever Irish sitcom in Britain, but basically the first ever Irish sitcom. Really, I think RTE had tried one sitcom years and years ago, which was disastrous and was appalling. And so it was the first ever really sitcom based in Ireland with Irish characters, and I think that's what helped Father Ted stand out. Even though the script was brilliant and the acting was great, but what really made it stand out was that nothing like that had been done before. I think.
yeah, and when you're up on stage doing your comedy, are you the type of person who writes down all the material, or do you do a Billy Connolly and just walk on, say what you
It's
walk up, forget it,
yeah,
2 minutes later?
it's a bit in between. I mean, I couldn't get up on stage not having anything prepared in my head, if you know what I mean. That would terrify me. The only person I really know, I'm not even sure if Billy Connolly does that. The only person I really know who did that was Phil Kay, the Scottish comedian, because I did a tour with him once, and every show we did, he just sort of fed off the audience really, and it was just totally different each night. I mean, well, I would like to throw in a new bit here and there and all that, but his show each night was just totally different. He just busked really, but it was genius at the same time. It wasn't just busking for the sake of it, if you know what I mean. But I suppose my stand-up act is since I started comparing. Initially, when I did stand-up, when I started in London, I just used to wear a mac and I just did these very droll one-liners, and I was so terrified I wouldn't even look at the audience. I just stare straight ahead and do my lines. But after a while, I started comparing when I moved to Glasgow, comparing at the Stand Comedy Club. And that's when I kind of got a bit more relaxed with sort of chatting to the audience if something happened or that kind of thing. I wouldn't pick on somebody because of they're wearing a strange shirt or something like that. I think that's a bit naff, But if something happened, it would be great to sort of go off on a riff or go off on a tangent. So I suppose I'm a sort of in between just doing material and busking. It's kind of mixture of both, I suppose.
Yeah. And one of the things you've worked on is Herald has one of Channel 4's weirdest programs that never gets repeated because I don't know why E4X haven't repeated it. But what was it like working on Brass Eye?
It was great, yeah. I mean, it was kind of I played a priest, but it was a very funny series because well, the whole series was great. But I remember the episode I was on was to do with the moving statues of the Virgin Mary in Ireland. Which was in one of my podcasts recently, an episode of my podcast recently, talking about the moving statues. I just think it's just such a ludicrous concept. But I remember at the time because I was living in Ireland at the time. Not when I did Brass Eye, but there was a previous sort of uh, sightings of the Virgin Mary. I think it was in the mid-80s, and I was still living in Ireland at the time. And most people didn't really believe that there was, statues of the Virgin Mary were moving. But I remember speaking to a friend of a friend, and she said to me, it was some shrine down in Wicklow, I think County Wicklow, which is just south of Dublin, which was apparently notorious for the Virgin moving about. It's a strange thing. I mean, if she never moved from her spot, you would think after 2,000 years, if she was just stuck in the spot, she would have gone to the shops or something if she was able to move or go to the local cinema to see a matinee. But she never moved from the spot. It was only, I think, it was sort of allegedly tears coming out of her eyes or something, which is probably some buildup of rain at the top of her head or something. I don't know. But I remember speaking to this woman, and she said, "Yeah, I went down." She said, "And something there definitely was something happening." And I said, "Well, what exactly was happening?" But she couldn't answer because it was just one of this mass hysteria, I think, you know.
Yeah.
Mm.
And and where did
But
the
I don't think she's moved since though. She's obviously settled in for the next 2,000 years.
and where did the idea of your podcast actually come from in the first place?
I think where it came from because I was not doing that much stand up these days. And I started just writing these pieces, which I thought might fit in a magazine or a newspaper, but I wasn't getting anywhere with them. Nobody was taking them up or anything. And then I realized how popular podcasting is becoming. So I just thought I'd give it a go, and it's kind of developed quite a lot since then. But the first two or three were just kind of I was just sort of reading out stuff that I'd written really as newspaper or magazine pieces. But then I kind of developed into more of a chatty kind of a podcast, which I think really is necessary for a podcast. You can't just sort of read out material.
Yeah. And
So
why
that's how basically how they came about. It's going for about since the end of April now, but we're getting over 6,000 downloads a month, which is up really fantastic.
and why do you reckon podcasts are becoming so popular?
I really don't know. I mean, it's a very strange thing. I think it's over the years. I mean, I've got three sons, and I know they very rarely watch television. Not particularly into podcasting, but they just listen to stuff online. Not many people watch television anymore, I don't think. And I think it's just given comedians and people with sort of a comic sort of outlet to do something without having to sort of go to commissioning editors in television and go through an agent and a production company, because that's what you have to do nowadays. You have to firstly get an agent, and then the agent has to submit an idea to a production company, and then the production company has to submit the idea to a television company. So it can go on for about 10 years. So it's just a lot more accessible doing podcasting or stuff online.
And do you reckon that because podcasts becoming so popular, it helps radio become even more popular because people are learning that they're enjoying listening to things, not just having to look at things all the time?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think also people's the level of concentration is a lot less than it used to be. I mean, you don't read, not many people read books anymore. It has to be kind of almost, instant stuff. That's the way it seems to be working these days. Like Twitter and Facebook, all social media, it's all just sort of dot 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 dot. You just have to hit people immediately. You won't sit around for half an hour waiting to be entertained.
Yeah. And one of the things you've been recently doing is writing some books. How did the idea of your books come about?
Well, the main book I've written is a book called Eamon, Older Brother of Jesus, and that came about from I was commissioned to write a show for radio BBC Radio 4. I was doing a show in Edinburgh called Eamon, Older Brother of Jesus, and a guy called Phil Clark, who was a producer in Radio 4 at the time. He's later to become commissioning editor, comedy commissioning editor for Channel 4. But he came to the show and he really liked it. And he said, would you like to submit an idea for Radio 4, which I did. And he really liked it. And then he submitted it to the guy who was the commissioning editor of Radio 4 at the time, a guy called Jonathan James Moore. He's a lovely old sort of Cambridge guy, the type that sort of wear corduroy jackets and leather patches on the elbows, that kind of guy. But he really liked the idea. So I was commissioned to write 6 episodes, which I did. And then we recorded all the episodes in the broadcasting house in Oxford Street. And then about a month later, I think Jonathan James Moore resigned as commissioning editor, and he was replaced by a guy called James Boyle, who was a Scottish Catholic. I don't know whether the fact that he was Scottish or Catholic is intertwined, but the show was due to go out about 2 months later, and he was flipping, this guy James Boyle, was flipping through the Radio Times one day, and he saw this show called Eamon, Older Brother of Jesus, which was due to go out at 11:15, and being a Catholic, he wanted to know what it was about, so he asked for the tapes as they were at the time. That's how long ago it was, and he considered it blasphemous. Now the whole thing about it was it wasn't. I've no problem about being blasphemous because I've no time for any religion, but the thrust of the show was not to be blasphemous. It was a classic sitcom whereby Jesus had this older brother who never got a look, and so it was a sitcom basically about sibling rivalry. But in this case, the younger brother happened to be the Messiah, so that's where it all came about. So it's basically about Eamon desperately trying to upstage his younger brother, which he never managed to do. That was the thrust of the show. But I was told later that the reason he cancelled it, was being a Catholic, was that if Jesus had an older brother, that meant that Mary wasn't a virgin. Now, that was something I would expect to hear on in Ireland, but I thought maybe, the BBC in London would be a bit more sort of open-minded, but apparently not. But so it's basically he took it off the air. He wouldn't let it go out. I received a few little sort of clips on. Alan Davis had a radio show on Radio One, I think, and he used to play a few little clips of it here and there, but it never went out as a fully fledged sitcom on Radio 4. So a couple of years later, I thought, well, I have all these stories because they're from the sitcom, so I thought I'd just write a book.
Yeah.
Basically, just sort of, it's a series of kind of short stories, I suppose, really based on each episode that I wrote for the sitcom. And once again, I sent it around to lots of agents and all that, but nobody was interested yet again. And then it's only about 3 or 4 years ago, I think I noticed that Amazon allowed you to self-publish. So I just wrote it up and self-published it basically. And it went quite well initially because I've quite a lot of followers on Twitter and Facebook, and a lot of them bought it. But then once that sort of fizzled out, the sales sort of started going down again. But since I did the interview with Richard Herring, and the sales started going up again. I also heard from Richard Herring this morning that some guy in BBC Archives listened to the interview with Richard, and he wanted to find out sort of if the show was still in the archives in BBC, and he found it. And he said they're going to digitalize it, and he's going to submit it to some guy on Radio 4, which it might go out on Radio 4 Extra. So if that happens after all these years, that'd be great,
Yeah, it's because it's archive material has become like the most popular thing. A lot of people love saving things. I think
Yeah.
it would attract a high listenership because people love the idea of media never like pretending like it's disappeared and people
Yes,
find
exactly. Yeah.
it.
So it'd be great if it gets an airing again. That'd be fantastic. Yeah. But
And
we will see. I
yeah,
never hold my breath with these things,
and do you reckon that when it goes out, do you reckon it'll be as popular as it was going to be when it was first rumored to be releasing?
Well, I hope so. I mean, once again, it's one of these things, Tom, you just don't know. I mean, as I said, when I did Father Ted, I was in the second episode of the first series, so it hadn't been shown on television at this stage. So nobody had any idea at that stage whether it was going to be a success. You don't really know because it's very hard to tell when you're on the inside looking out whether people are going to like it or not.
Yeah.
And I remember actually the first episode was reviewed. I think it was I can't remember, it might have been the Independent at the time, but it was slated. I mean, whoever did the review actually slated it and thought it was a lot of nonsense. So, but then again, a few episodes in, it started getting rave reviews. So you just never know, really.
And one of the things that you've done is one of the things you've done a lot of things, but one of the things you've done what was it like writing on Comedy Nation?
It was great because that's once again it was for Phil Clark who produced the Aim and Older Brother of Jesus for Radio 4. He was the producer of this because he moved into the BBC at this stage. And it was good fun because a lot of it was just it was stuff based on my stand-up. I kind of sort of adapted them to sort of little sketches here and there. So it was really good fun. I really liked it. Yeah. Really enjoyed it.
And
it was a bit different as well. Comedy Nation. It was, I think it was the first time that I always forget his name. I really shouldn't. The guy who did the. That'll come back to me. But go on. I'll think of it in the meantime.
Yeah, and
he got really. That was the first time he did television. I remember the name.
And
well, the guy who played Borat. Sorry, Borat.
Sacha Baron Cohen.
Sacha Baron Cohen. Yeah, I think that was the first time he appeared on television. Apologies, Sacha, for forgetting your name. I'm getting old.
And one of the things you've worked on recently, I'm gonna say 2 years. I think it's going to be 2 years since it returned as a one-off special to celebrate its anniversary. But what was it like appearing on an episode of Friday Night Live?
Well, that was in 1989. That was amazing. Yeah, it was both exciting and terrifying because it was literally live. It wasn't just sort of, they didn't just call it Friday Night Live to make it sound good. It was actually live. It wasn't a recording. So what you were saying was going straight out to people in TV land. And I was told later, I didn't actually notice it because I mentioned before earlier, I used to wear a Mac in those days, it wasn't supposed to be a creepy old man. It was supposed to be just sort of a strange character who wore a mac. It was amazing because that really heightened my profile because I'd only been in London a couple of years at that stage, and it was a kind of a it was a big boost to get on that because every stand up in England wanted to be on that at the time. It was the I suppose it was the live at the Apollo of its time, you know.
And was it nerve-wracking doing it because you got the fear of accidentally messing up your routine and ruining the whole joke?
It was terrifying, terrifying and exciting because, as I say, you couldn't. I mean, if you're doing stand up in a stage show and you forget your lines, you can make a joke about it to the audience, but you can't sort of make a joke about that to 6 million people. It doesn't work on television, you know. So, but fortunately, I suppose, I was fairly sure I knew my lines, but you still never know. I mean, you can just suddenly get a horrible blank, and you just forget your lines. But fortunately, it went okay, and I did manage to remember all my lines, and it was yeah, it really boosted my confidence and my profile. Yeah.
And do you reckon that stand-up works really well on TV when it's going out live, or do you reckon it's better when it's edited and recorded?
I don't think it works as well in either format compared to the live. But I mean, probably if it is going out live on television, then it's better than a recorded one. But neither I don't think gets the same sort of reaction as live comedy does. I think stand up is most suited to a live audience. Put it that way.
Yeah,
But I think it still works on television. I'm not saying it doesn't work. But if you were to compare the two, I think the most stand-ups would say they prefer sort of performing to a live audience because you're getting that feedback. You can feel it, because
yeah.
you're in the same room. But if you're on television, you don't really get that sense. And also if you do, I did another stand-up show called Live at the King's Theatre in Glasgow. But the problem was doing even it didn't go out live, but it was in front of an audience. But the thing is that if you're doing a televised stand-up show with an audience, that they can get distracted with all the cameras and the lighting and all that. It's not like doing a live because they're not that much focused as they would be on the stand-up as they would be if it was just in a club somewhere. You know what I mean?
And when you're recording these stand-up shows, do you perform the set once, or do you have to perform it several times if anything like messes up?
If it's in front of an audience, just once, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I think when I was doing that show at the Kings, I think there was one technical thing and I had to come back, but I mean, it wasn't because I messed up a line or anything. They had to just sort of tell the audience there was some kind of a technical problem, and that would be sorted out in a few minutes, which it was. I mean, that's fine because the audience are relaxed as long as they understand what's happening. It was fine. There was no wasn't awkward in any way.
yeah. And for anyone that's got to this point in the interview and have not wet themselves because they've controlled themselves because they've been
Yeah.
laughing too much, they've thought I might not wee myself because it'll take a while to clean up. What
Yeah.
advice would you give anyone that wants to do comedy as a hobby or a career?
I don't think you can do it as a hobby, really. I think you have to just go all out. That would be my feel anyway, because you're going to die in your arse a few times. And if you're just doing it as a hobby, then it's not going to be a very nice hobby. Because I know when I started off, there were a few times I thought, I'm just going to stop. I'm not good enough. I think every stand-up has had that sort of crisis of confidence. And I mean, there may be some people with different outlook to me, different personalities that could do it as a hobby, but I personally could never have done it as a hobby. It had to be sort of, this is my career, and I've just got to. If I die one night, then I just go back and sort it out. Learn from my mistakes, that kind of thing.
And at what point in your journey into comedy would you say there was the right time to tell people that you were a comedian?
How do you mean tell members of the public that I'm
Like,
not?
when you're asked what your job is, you can say you're a
Oh yeah,
comedian.
once I started getting paid for it, really. But I've told him, and I don't know, I'm a bit cut off from the stand-up circuit these days, but I'm told there are some open spots, on social media. Have done about 2 or 3 open spots, and they're calling themselves comedians, which is ridiculous. And good luck to them if they get to be comedians, but you can't call yourself a comedian if you're just doing a few open spots. You have to. I think you should. The only way you can call yourself a professional comedian is if you are getting paid, basically.
And one of the things you've done on the radio is a interesting format that should return because it's a fascinating concept. What was it like appearing in an episode of 28 acts in 28 minutes?
Oh, that's where we just did a minute, I think. Yeah, we all did a minute each, wasn't that it? Yeah. I
Yeah.
think it was recorded in Manchester. Yeah, it was great. Yeah, it was recorded in the Comedy Store in Manchester, and that was in front of that was once again that was in front of a live audience again, but it was radio, so it wasn't as terrifying. But it was yeah, I mean it was very strange because normally if you're doing a stand-up show to an audience, you don't normally get them within a minute. It usually takes a few minutes before they sort of get into your personality. But I think they've sort of been hyped. The audience have been hyped up, and they knew what it was about. So yeah, it was great. I mean, you all just went on and did a minute of your stand-up, but it was everybody got a great reaction. It was just really good fun. It was produced by Chilushi Gilani, who was a radio producer at the time. I think she's head of Sky Comedy now, I think.
And was that hard to come up with what is your best material for that minute, or was it?
It wasn't really difficult for me because I say a lot of my stuff is based on one-liners, or it's more so then than it is now. So it's very easy for me to just put a collection of 5 or 6 one-liners in for a minute. But it must have been hard for some comedians who are more storytelling based. It'd be very hard to fit a story into 1 minute. So I think some of them just had to do something a little bit different that fitted into the minute's schedule. But it was very easy for me because I could just throw in 5 or 6 one-liners, and I thought I was fairly sure they'd go okay.
And I think that's why those type of formats work, because a lot of people now are realizing that one-liners are a lot easier just to slip into everyday conversations.
Yes, it's more accessible. Yeah, just sort of more sort of uh, quick hit kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, like Milton Jones was on Sunday Brunch, and he
Mm.
used because he had 3 hours to just every
Yeah.
time someone wasn't saying anything, he would slip in and then just make everyone just ignore the
Yeah.
wrong right TV and the
Yeah.
wrong
Yeah.
right name, and went, "Oh no, we need to finish cooking this creme
Yeah.
brulee."
Yeah. 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 It fits it perfectly. That sort of thing. Yeah. The only problem about a one-liner comedian, there's another great comedian called Stephen Wright, the American comedian. I don't know whether you know him.
Yeah,
Is that it's very difficult to do a full-length show of one-liners. Because if you're just doing one line after one liner, the audience get laughed out. Because I remember there was, I won't mention his name, but he's a brilliant, brilliant one liner. But when I used to compare the Stand Comedy Club, he was on one night, and really is brilliant. But I had some friends in the audience who loved him, but they said after about 13 or 14 minutes, they were just laughed out. They just, even though the material he did after that was just as good, they sort of laughed themselves out because it was just one liner after one liner. So it's very difficult to do a sort of an hour show of just one liners. You need to sort of broaden it out in some way.
yeah. And one of the things you've done, which is described as a film, because that's what it is. You can't describe something that's a film that isn't a film. What
Mm.
was it like appearing in the film Round the Island with a Fridge?
was Tony Hawk's. Yeah, it was really good fun. Yeah, I mean, I had a very tiny part. And I think I was in a pub talking about something. I can't remember exactly, but yeah, it was good fun because I knew Tony a lot from the stand-up days in London, and I think I'd met the producer as well. So it was just good fun. It was just, I think it was recorded somewhere. It wasn't recorded. My bit wasn't recorded in Ireland because it was an indoor thing. It was in some pub in London. I can't remember where. But yeah, it was good fun because I really liked Tony's stuff, and he's a good laugh, and it's just really enjoyable. Yeah.
And have you? And so, as your career keeps on growing and you keep on
Mm.
doing things, and until the end of time,
Yes, indeed. Which
there
might
any,
have been too long. I'm 74.
is there any projects you've got coming up either on stage, screen, or in people's ear holes that you're excited for people to see, listen, and come along to?
Yeah, well, I can tell you what, but I can only give a certain amount of details because I'm contracted not to say exactly what it is. But I've been over in Ireland last week filming a Netflix series. I've got a part in a Netflix series which is coming out in I think it's due to come out in April or May, but I'm not allowed to say what the series is about. Um, Contractually, I'm afraid. I don't know why. I think Netflix are a bit fussy about things like that for some reason. I don't know why. But I'm not allowed to say what it's about. But I can tell you that I play a part of a Garda sergeant, which is Garda is the Irish police force in the Republic of Ireland. It's the RUC in Northern. So I play the part of a bit of an idiot Garda, really, in a little village. But it's good fun because I've already. I think I'll be in 5 episodes. It's an 8 episode series, and I'll be in 5 episodes of it. I've already recorded the first 2 episodes, and I'm going back in a couple of weeks to do some more. So I'm pretty excited about that because I've never been on a Netflix series before, and also um, it's the first time I've ever sort of been in more than one episode on a TV series. I mean, I'm in Flags, Bags, and Bags. I'm in each episode, but in Father Ted, I was just in one episode. But this one, I'll be in 5 episodes. I mean, I'm not. It's not a huge part. I'm not kind of playing the main part or anything like that, but I will appear in 5 episodes, which is great.
And
So
and
I'm pretty excited about that, and also the podcast. I mean, that's what I sort of work on most days is working on the podcast, trying to sort of come up with ideas, which is not always easy, but it's a hard thing to do. Kind of coming up. Well, it was initially every week, but because I'm doing this filming for this Netflix series, I had to change it to 2 weeks because I just didn't have the time every week to think up something to talk about, basically. But it's also broadened my sort of creative output, I think, because on podcasts you have to kind of waffle a little bit. I mean, it doesn't mean you have to. I mean, you have to kind of it can't be scripted. You have to kind of just talk off the top of your head sometimes, which is really it's a good discipline, you know. So that's what I'm spending most of my time doing at the moment is working on the podcast. But so it's getting over 6,000 downloads a month, which is fantastic, and which has increased a bit since Richard's interview as well.
and do you reckon that having more listeners to your podcast will help funnel your reach to more things like other Netflix series or other programs for other channels?
Hopefully, yeah. If it comes, I mean, as I say, 6,000 downloads a month is pretty good. But I mean, to kind of get really, really big, you want to be on 30 or 40,000 downloads a month. But if it gets to that, I think yeah, it will sort of hugely heighten my profile, yeah, and who knows what doors may open. You know,
And
that is the aim anyway.
and to let our viewers know, where can people listen to your podcast?
I'll give you the link. It's what are you doing in my garden? .podbean.com. That's Podbean, BEAN. So it's what are you doing in my garden altogether? .podbean.com. That's the link to the
There we go.
podcast.
And it is well worth a listen. And will you ever do any live editions of your podcast on stage?
It's hard to know because a lot of it wouldn't suit just being live. But I suppose if it became really popular, I could kind of edit it down and see how I could sort of fit in an hour of it. Yeah, if it becomes a big thing, then I definitely would consider doing that. Yeah, there's no doubt. Yeah.
And so, as we come towards the end of this wonderful, glorious, yet amazing, as I keep on saying, that dictionary is taking a while to eat. I'm in the middle of eating the letter H, but then at the same time, I'm also trying to swallow an English dictionary as well as a Scottish dictionary of all the Scottish words, including all the different versions of the Scottish language.
Okay.
So it's taken quite a while to chow down on them because they're very, very thick, and you have to pour some milk on it to help it,
Yes.
and then it will so into your brain. Um, and so as we're at this point of the interview,
Mm.
where do you know? Wait, let me work on what I was going to say. I think I've lost it.
Take your time.
Will you be doing any more stand-up shows anytime in the next 12 years? Let's say.
Well, I would definitely in the next 12 years. Yeah, I'm not for at the moment. I'm not doing any, but I definitely intend to go back to it. Yeah, particularly if the podcast takes off. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Yeah,
Yeah.
if I'm
Yeah.
still alive.
And do you have a website where people can sign up to a
I
newsletter?
don't, but I don't, but we're working on putting up a website in the next couple of months here because I want to sort of, sell my book on it and advertise the podcast and advertise anything else I'm doing. Yeah, so hopefully in the next couple of months I will have a website. Yeah, but not at the moment. No.
And so stay tuned for his website. It'll be as amazing as he is
Yeah,
himself.
yeah. I'd probably call it michaelredmond.com, but it isn't out yet.
That sounds like the perfect title.
Yes, indeed. Yeah,
Yeah, it's easy to remember and simple to type in,
exactly.
unless
Yes.
unless you misspell something and then you end up in the wrong place.
Unless you spell Michael Micheal rather than AEL, which a lot of people do.
Yeah. And so there we have it. Another wonderful interview. Thank you for letting me interview you.
No, thank you, Tom. I've really enjoyed it. You're a very good interviewer.
Thank you. And so, if you want to see more interviews by me as of the 1st of August 2024, I did remember what year it was. Don't worry. There might be more interviews today. Woo! Who knows? who knows how long the internet will take to upload these things? So if it's not today, might be tomorrow. It depends on the speed
I
of
know.
it,
Yeah.
it's all speed, not the dangerous speed, the correct speed. We're
Yes,
not
I know.
not promoting dodgy speed. But there we have it. Thank you guys for watching. And remember, no, I've forgotten.